Good evening, and welcome to this week's episode of Tuesday Night Talks, where I talk to you about something. This week's topic is about arts education, right? Specifically, the funding and education of the arts in public schools. How am I qualified to talk about this? I went to public school for all 12 years, 13 years of my primary and secondary education. And although I am not super artistic, I do appreciate the art programs that my school had offered to me. I played the guitar, I draw occasionally, but I never participated in, music class or anything beyond elementary school choir. So I'd say I'm somewhat qualified to talk about this, but you clicked on this video, you know how it goes. I just talked to you. So, why is it that I'm talking to you about this? Well, an interesting statistic that I've come across from the National Endowment for the Arts is that over 80% of students in public schools across the country are interested in arts education, right? And that's a fairly benign statistic. It's something that you'd expect. Well, of course, students are interested in taking, an arts class. But then when you look at the support that they are given, only 64% of arts programs are properly funded. 71% have enough materials, equipment, implements, and whatnot. 68% have enough facilities, but only 64% are adequately funded. Now, that's rather unfortunate. How does that come to be? Well, one of the big sources of funding for most public school arts programs come from the school district that they're a part of, right? As opposed to the county, the state, the federal government. Most school districts only receive $5,000 per funding source to spend on their arts education, right? Now, that varies from school district to school district, and that's one of the key issues that I see here, is the difference between school districts. Where I live, I went to public school, but where I live, there are Christian schools nearby and charter schools nearby. Now, of course, we had the classic inter-school rivalry of the public schools versus the charter kids versus the Catholics, whatever they're doing. But there's a deeper divide there. The schools that I went to were public. They were Title I, I believe, is the term. Yes, Title I, which means they serve a underserved community, right? Where a certain percent of students fall below the poverty line. And one thing that I can tell you with certainty is that the other schools definitely had more funding, those charter and Christian schools. Now, I was more focused on sports and academics in school than arts, right? The extent of my formal art education was elementary school music class and choir, which was really fun. But I continued playing sports throughout the rest of my, through middle school and high school. And that perspective, for me at least, still lets me compare the public schools versus the, non-public schools, the private schools. It was a common phrase that we have one coach for our team or two coaches for our team. Let's say we have two coaches for our team, whereas the private school has one coach per two students or something like that. The funding disparity is pretty great. Now, what about that charter school? That charter school does not charge tuition like the Christian schools did, and of course, tuition is a big part of their funding beyond the diocese. So, how is it that they're still able to get those funds? They were also a Title I school. You'd think that wouldn't make much of a difference. We're starting to compare apples to apples here, but I feel that whether or not they actually had more money to spend, they at least gave off the impression of being more affluent. Again, the public schools are funded primarily through the school districts, which is to say they get their funding from taxpayers, local taxpayers. According to the National Association for Music Education, in recent years, only 27% of schools or school districts received some levels of federal funding. 32% reported that they received no federal funding at all. That's, I'd say, par for the course. It's a rather unfortunate statistic, but it is just the way it is. The way that the public school system is set up in America has again, lend itself to being a very compartmentalized system. It's not very top-down. Each state has their own board of education, and then each school district within there might report to the county, or just be their own world. What about additional funding sources? This is where the charter schools really shine. They have their own independent sources of funding, whereas the public schools, they gotta take what they're given. Now, that's not the end-all be-all. Yes, arts programs are underfunded. There's not enough funding to meet demand. But why is there demand? It seems like it's a silly question. Of course, kids want to, paint and draw and play instruments, but I'd like to kind of dissect it. The two previous episodes have been sort of very intellectual focused, and education focused, and I think I'm going to continue that trend today by talking about how they continue to, what's the word I'm looking for? Further your education. Art programs, I mean. I've talked about fake intellectuals, and presenting yourself as well-educated, but continuing that well-educated theme, what does it mean to be well-rounded? Art programs are invaluable, and I really do mean that, because even though I didn't really take advantage of the opportunities that I had, it doesn't mean that other people don't. And it's a lot of students, I think you'll find, tend to bemoan a lot of the things they learn in school. Why am I learning trigonometry? I'm never going to learn this. Why do I need to know what Mesopotamia was like? I don't really care about these things because they're not super useful to me. Now, a lot of people would also say the same about art. Why do I need to take an art class? I'm not going to become an artist. I'm never going to need to know about perspective or cell shading or anything like that. But taking an art class, whether it may be a performance art or a, visual art, some sort of anything, really helps you to become a well-rounded individual. Now, some arts do provide concrete skills. Take, for example, theater. That is the one art class that I did take, and I quite enjoyed it. Whether you're on stage or behind stage, theater really does teach you a lot of concrete skills. Public speaking, how to work on with technical equipment, whether it be lights or sounds, practical assembly and design of props, all these sorts of things. But although a lot of arts do provide those concrete skills, there's a lot more abstract things. Like, take, for example, marching band. If you're in marching band, it's very physically demanding and mentally taxing. Being able to stand, march, move in formation, all these sorts of things. I'm not going to join the army. Why do I need to know how to stand in a row and march on cue? Yes, that's true. But what is that teaching you? It's teaching you teamwork. It's teaching you discipline. It's teaching you that the summer sun is very brutal. But it's teaching you these less concrete skills. What other arts are there? Cursive. Cursive isn't an art. Cursive is just handwriting. And cursive education has really fallen out of favor in favor of typing because, of course, this is the age of the internet. Everyone needs to know how to type. And a lot of schools have replaced handwriting, penmanship, with typing. There's, of course, everyone needs to learn typing, but does it really need to be a replacement? Because what does learning cursive teach you? I learned cursive when I was in the 3rd grade, and I myself write in cursive. One, because it looks pretty, and two, a lot of people can't read it, so I could be writing God knows what. You can't copy off my notes. But it teaches you, one, because you're writing faster, it teaches you to think on your feet. It teaches you the discipline of learning cursive, and at least for me, when I print, I have pretty shoddy penmanship, but when I'm writing in cursive, yeah, it's kind of sloppy, but it looks very pretty. And I think a valuable lesson that I learned from all the blood, sweat, and tears I spent as a 7-year-old trying to learn cursive is that just because a thing is practical doesn't mean it can't be beautiful, right? We all write things just to write things, to get it written down, to remember it, to file it away, but that doesn't mean it doesn't need to be, that doesn't mean it can't be beautiful. That doesn't mean it needs to be wholly utilitarian and practical. And that is one thing that I think all art education gives students, is the opportunity to reflect on the world. One, build on their natural curiosity, of course, but two is to build an appreciation of the arts, because the arts are a uniquely, fundamentally human thing. Many other species have been, documented using language. Think whales, dolphins, using tools. Think bears and other primates. But art is a uniquely human trait. It's very different picking up a stick and using it to fish termites out of a mound than sitting down and using a stick that you've burnt over fire to draw a picture of an animal, right? It's a fundamentally human thing to create. One of my pastimes has been drawing. I'm no good at it, but the idea of sitting down and drawing something that hasn't existed before outside of my mind and creating something is very profound. And the ability to look at something and appreciate its intricacies is a very valuable thing to teach our children. a lot of people don't go to museums, art museums, because for whatever reason. But appreciating the arts doesn't need to mean going to a museum and looking at a painting and, contemplating it, looking at the techniques, so on and so forth. Appreciating the arts means looking at the beauty around you and being able to mull it over, to ponder upon it, right? Going back to the idea of wonder. Whether or not you're good at creating art, the fact that you've created art is incredibly profound. And I don't think any child should ever be denied of that. I think it really needs to be promoted. And whether or not you actually enjoy, viewing and experiencing art is that's not the point. It's the point that you can sit down and think over these ideas, contemplate the beauty, and, look at things from a different perspective. Math teaches you problem solving. English, language arts classes teach you how to communicate. History teaches you not to repeat your mistakes. And science teaches you to be investigative. And, all these sort of things, all the subjects in school have some deeper meaning to offer. And the arts have a very unique opportunity to offer you humanity, in the sense that you now have the opportunity to be creative and look at the world around you with not quite a critical thinking perspective, but yeah, I'd say yes, a critical thinking perspective. The arts teach you to think critically and, look into something, not just what's on its surface, but interpreting things. I think that's very powerful. The arts give you the chance to continue being a child, in a sense. At some point in your life, you were told to sit down, sit up straight, pay attention, be quiet. And art gives you an opportunity to maybe slouch a little, maybe run your mouth a little bit, fidget, and be creative. Instead of thinking linearly, thinking critically, thinking creatively. Art nurtures an education with an art education supports the whole child, right? It keeps you engaged. It gives you, of course, a creative outlet for you to create. And I think it preserves the child in you. It gives you, it helps you meet your innate need to create, to inspire. Ooh, I sound so corporate now, but it really does. I think an education without art is kind of pointless. An education without the opportunity to create is pointless. If you're only ever learning, if you're consuming, if you're taking in information and you're not creating something, if you're not creating art, then are you really processing it? And I think that art should be not just a class that you take, whether it be pottery or photography or public speaking or whatnot. It should be incorporated. Find a way to incorporate the arts into everything you do. Use your innate creativity, because That's what makes you human. That's one of the things that makes you human, is your creativity and your wonder. The ability to take an idea, an original idea, and create something new and original with that. So maybe my point is that if we keep art in schools, we keep our children human, which is a really weird way to end it, but that's how I'm going to end it. This has been Tuesday Night Talks. Thanks for listening.